I drove for 5 hours through a heavy snowstorm, bringing Christmas gifts to surprise my family. My name is Marcus, a 32-year-old infantryman finally returning from a long overseas deployment. Navigating the icy highway for 5 brutal hours had exhausted me, but the thought of their surprised faces kept my hands steady on the steering wheel. Stepping onto the familiar porch with carefully wrapped boxes in my arms, I noticed the front door was carelessly left unlocked and slightly ajar. Just as I raised my hand to push it wide open, a chilling conversation, echoing clearly from the living room, completely paralyzed me in my tracks. The voices belonged to my parents, discussing my military service with an unnatural coldness that made my blood run instantly cold. "I hope he disappears on the battlefield, and this house will be ours," my father stated with absolute zero hesitation or remorse in his tone. They were casually plotting my permanent absence just to claim full ownership of the property I had purchased entirely with my combat pay. Without making a single sound to alert them of my presence, I slowly lowered the stack of presents onto the snow-covered steps. Later that night, my phone vibrated endlessly with desperate calls from the people who had just wished for my death. They panicked upon finding the gifts outside, but they had absolutely no idea that the following morning would bring consequences far worse than a simple, silent departure. If you have ever experienced the ultimate betrayal from the very people who should have protected you, subscribe to this channel and follow along as I systematically dismantle their comfortable lives. My life as an infantryman meant spending most of my time deployed overseas executing dangerous combat missions across the Middle East. Surviving those harsh environments required immense focus, but it also allowed me to accumulate a significant amount of hazard pay over several consecutive tours. Volunteering for extra patrols and extending my deployments meant missing countless holidays back home, but it maximized the income I could send back. Instead of wasting that hard-earned money on temporary comforts or expensive vehicles like many of my peers did, I decided to execute a long-term financial plan to secure a stable future for my family. Knowing the continuous economic struggles they faced back home pushed me to save every extra dollar with the specific intention of eliminating their financial burdens permanently. After returning from my third deployment, I began searching through real estate listings and eventually purchased a spacious residential house in Columbus, Ohio. This property was situated in a quiet suburban neighborhood, providing a secure environment where they could comfortably retire without ever worrying about monthly rent payments or unexpected evictions from angry landlords. I wanted them to experience absolute peace of mind during their senior years after decades of living paycheck to paycheck in cramped apartments across different cities. During this transition, I introduced the plan to my father Richard and my mother Martha, assuring them that their primary housing expenses were completely resolved. To guarantee their daily comfort, I established an automated banking system that transferred a generous monthly allowance directly from my military salary into their joint checking account. This designated amount was carefully calculated to cover all standard utilities, groceries, and regular maintenance costs, so they would never need to seek part-time employment again. Because I could not be physically present to inspect the property or sign the final closing documents, I relied heavily on my best friend David to handle the complicated ground logistics. He meticulously reviewed all the complex real estate paperwork, verified the structural integrity of the roof and heating systems, and finalized the legal contracts before I authorized the massive wire transfer from my overseas base. The deed to the property was registered entirely in my own name to ensure the investment remained protected, while granting my parents full residency rights for the rest of their natural lives. Shortly after they moved into the new home, the household dynamics began to shift drastically when my sister Valerie decided to relocate there as well. She had recently lost another apartment due to unpaid rent and immediately turned to our parents for a convenient bailout. Despite being a fully capable adult, she constantly complained about her personal financial difficulties and claimed she needed a temporary place to stay while securing a stable career in the area. That supposed temporary arrangement quickly evolved into a permanent residency as she comfortably settled into the largest guest bedroom without contributing a single dollar to the shared household expenses. Valerie relied entirely on the monthly allowance I provided to our parents, essentially using my combat pay to subsidize her continuous lack of employment and expensive lifestyle choices. She spent most of her days lounging in the newly furnished living room, while I was thousands of miles away carrying a heavy rifle through the unforgiving desert heat. I never actively complained about supporting the three of them, because I firmly believed that taking care of your relatives was a fundamental duty of a providing son. However, a bitter reality began to set in during my subsequent deployments, when communication from their end became entirely transactional. Spending weeks in hostile territories where communication networks were often unreliable made me deeply value the rare opportunities I had to call home. Yet whenever I finally managed to secure a satellite phone connection to hear their voices, the conversations rarely centered around my physical safety or mental well-being. Richard or Martha would briefly ask about the weather in my location before quickly transitioning the topic to upcoming property taxes or requesting additional funds for unforeseen household repairs. Valerie would occasionally grab the receiver only to complain about the local job market or hint that she desperately needed a newer vehicle to attend job interviews. They eagerly anticipated the notification of my monthly bank transfers, but remained completely disconnected from the dangerous reality I faced daily to generate that income. Hanging up the receiver after those calls always left me feeling incredibly empty as I geared up for another night patrol. I deliberately pushed those uncomfortable thoughts aside and continued transferring the funds, convincing myself that providing them with total financial security was worth the growing emotional distance between us. 1 month before Christmas, the frequency of incoming calls from Columbus suddenly skyrocketed far beyond our usual monthly check-ins. Rather than asking about my upcoming return schedule from the base, they immediately focused on demanding a doubled limit for their secondary credit card. "The cost of heating is out of control, Marcus. We really need you to bump up the monthly allowance." My mom complained through the static of the international phone line. She aggressively listed off a series of supposedly unavoidable expenses, including skyrocketing winter utilities, alongside severe inflation, rendering their fixed pensions entirely insufficient for basic survival. Richard echoed her sentiments in the background, claiming the older house required massive weatherproofing upgrades to survive the incoming Midwest winter storms. Every single conversation felt heavily scripted to extract the maximum amount of financial support from my deployment earnings. Trusting their desperate tone without a single trace of suspicion regarding their sudden financial hardship, I immediately pulled up my military banking application. "I will authorize an increase on the secondary card today," I confirmed while rubbing my exhausted eyes before initiating the formal request with the financial institution. Approving that massive limit increase felt like the responsible duty of an older son ensuring his family remained safe throughout the freezing holiday season. I honestly believed every single dollar was being carefully allocated toward essential groceries or vital home maintenance projects to keep them warm. Transferring those extra funds required dipping into the specific savings account I had deliberately built for my own civilian transition after leaving the military. That naive assumption completely shattered roughly 2 weeks later during a rare moment of downtime inside the base barracks. Idly scrolling through my social media feed on my smartphone, I stumbled upon a highly publicized post uploaded directly to Valerie's public profile. The digital photo boldly showcased her sitting alongside my parents inside one of the most notoriously expensive downtown steakhouses in the entire city. A towering seafood tower dominated the center of their large table while a sharply dressed waiter poured expensive imported wine into their crystal glasses. The caption underneath the image shamelessly bragged about treating the family to a luxurious weekend dinner without any mention of the actual person funding the extravagant event. Calculating the visible menu items alone, I realized that single bottle of wine cost significantly more than an entire week's worth of standard household groceries. She had even tagged the specific geographic location, proving they were dining at a premium establishment known for requiring reservations months in advance. A sickening wave of realization washed over me as I immediately logged back into my secure online banking portal to review the detailed transaction history. I aggressively typed in my security credentials, eager to disprove the knot forming tightly inside my stomach. The digital ledger exposed a horrifying reality that entirely contradicted their previous complaints about struggling to afford basic winter utility bills. I scrolled through page after page of massive charges originating from high-end boutique clothing stores, alongside expensive salon visits and premium restaurant tabs. Every single line item confirmed my worst suspicions regarding the manipulative tactics they utilized to drain my accounts over the phone. The emergency funds I had authorized specifically for winterizing the house had instead been entirely drained to finance Valerie's lavish lifestyle choices. I clicked on several individual receipts revealing massive purchases for designer handbags and cosmetic treatments, completely unrelated to any household survival needs. They were systematically bleeding my combat savings dry while treating my hard-earned military salary like an endless personal jackpot. Staring at the glowing screen, I felt an intense coldness replace the warmth I previously associated with providing for my relatives. The sheer audacity of their financial deception completely erased any lingering feelings of familial obligation I previously held toward them. A few weeks later, I bypassed the usual communication channels completely and formally requested a short holiday leave from my commanding officer. Instead of initiating an explosive confrontation over a compromised satellite phone line, I decided I absolutely needed to verify their actual living conditions with my own two eyes. Securing a temporary pass allowed me to finally execute a sudden trip back to Columbus without giving them any prior warning about my arrival. I immediately navigated toward the large commercial shopping center, located just outside the Fort Campbell gates, to purchase several highly practical holiday presents for the family. Browsing through the crowded aisles, I deliberately selected heavy winter coats, alongside essential household appliances, rather than preparing my usual thick envelopes stuffed with cash. Providing tangible necessities felt like the only appropriate method to test their genuine reactions after discovering their luxurious steakhouse dining habits. Packing the wrapped boxes securely into the passenger seat of my truck, I ignored the ominous weather reports broadcasting constantly across the local radio stations. Electronic digital billboards positioned above the interstate continuously flashed bright amber warnings about a severe incoming snowstorm approaching the exact Midwest region. Despite the official travel advisories urging motorists to remain indoors, I firmly turned the ignition key and steered my vehicle onto the northbound highway ramp. The journey northward quickly deteriorated into a grueling 5-hour endurance test as thick sheets of freezing rain rapidly transformed the asphalt into a treacherous sheet of solid black ice. "Are you sure you want to drive in this mess?" the exhausted gas station attendant asked me while processing my fuel payment at a desolate highway rest stop. "I need to see things for myself," I replied shortly before snatching my credit card from the counter and trudging back through the heavy snowfall to resume my agonizing journey. Visibility dropped to near zero, forcing me to grip the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned completely white under the dashboard lights. Every single mile required absolute concentration to prevent my heavy tires from losing traction and sending the truck sliding dangerously into the deep roadside ditches. I maintained an incredibly slow crawling speed while following the faint taillights of a snowplow, clearing a narrow path through the accumulating drifts. Fighting the intense physical fatigue threatening to close my heavy eyelids, I deliberately focused my mind entirely on anticipating the exact moment I would finally step onto their front porch. Visualizing the absolute shock registering on their faces upon realizing their primary financial provider had unexpectedly materialized for the holiday served as my only motivation to keep moving forward. Eventually, the familiar street signs of their quiet suburban neighborhood emerged through the relentless blizzard, completely devoid of any other moving vehicles. Recognizing that the distinct rumbling sound of my heavy diesel engine would instantly ruin the element of surprise, I made a strategic tactical decision regarding my approach. I smoothly pulled the truck into an empty visitor parking space, situated exactly 1 full block away from their immediate property line. Killing the headlights, I sat silently in the freezing cabin for a brief moment, gathering the brightly wrapped packages tightly against my insulated winter jacket. Kicking my heavy military boots through the deepening snowbanks, I began walking the remaining distance toward the house, entirely undetected by anyone inside. The freezing wind violently whipped against my face, but I completely ignored the bitter cold as I carefully navigated the slippery suburban sidewalks leading toward the property. Approaching the edge of the front yard, I noticed the warm, glowing lights spilling from their living room windows, painting a deceptive picture of domestic perfection against the dark winter night. The moment I stepped inside, I froze when the unmistakable shrill pitch of Valerie complaining echoed clearly from the warmly lit living room. Pushing the heavy wooden front door open just a few inches, revealed an unobstructed view of them relaxing comfortably near the blazing living room fireplace. She aggressively complained about the recently increased credit card limit, claiming the designated amount remained entirely insufficient to finance a brand new vehicle. "He should just hand over the bank accounts to us completely," Valerie angrily stated from the comfortable living room sofa while tossing her smartphone onto the glass coffee table. My mom immediately chimed in to support that ridiculous demand, asserting they deserved total control over my military salary to distribute freely without waiting for monthly deposits. Listening to their conversation unfold further revealed the full extent of their coordinated financial deception against me over the past several years. They genuinely believed my hazardous combat pay existed exclusively to sponsor their luxurious shopping habits, rather than securing their essential survival during retirement. Their voices carried a sickening level of entitlement, confirming they viewed my dangerous military service merely as a convenient tool for their personal enrichment. The absolute peak of their heartless cruelty arrived moments later, shattering every last illusion of familial loyalty I still harbored within my mind. "I hope he disappears on the battlefield, and this house will be ours," my dad stated with a chillingly cold and casual tone completely devoid of any parental hesitation. Hearing the man who raised me casually wish for my violent demise just to expedite an inheritance transfer completely paralyzed my entire body. The sickening realization that they actively prayed for my military casualty to secure their unearned real estate wealth instantly eradicated any lingering affection. Without producing a single sound to alert them of my silent arrival, I deliberately lowered the heavy-wrapped presents onto the snowy porch boards. Retrieving a thick black marker from my heavy winter coat pocket, I decisively scribbled a final message across the largest box declaring all financial subsidies permanently terminated, leaving that definitive written proof of my sudden visit resting directly beside the front door. Felt incredibly liberating after years of endless financial exploitation. I turned my back on the glowing windows and marched rapidly through the deepening snowdrifts toward the hidden parking spot where my truck waited. Throwing my freezing body into the driver's seat, I aggressively twisted the ignition key and steered the heavy vehicle away from the quiet suburban street. Almost immediately, the illuminated screen of my cellular device began lighting up the dark cabin with an endless barrage of incoming emergency calls. They had obviously discovered the snow-covered packages, along with my blunt written message sparking an immediate wave of intense panic among the three of them. I completely ignored the vibrating phone rattling violently inside the cup holder, choosing instead to focus the entirety of my attention on the dark highway ahead. Driving away from that toxic environment marked the exact moment I finally chose my own survival over fulfilling the endless demands of greedy relatives. They were frantically attempting to salvage their primary source of income, but my decision to sever those parasitic ties was already permanent. Listening to the engine roaring through the winter storm provided a bizarre sense of comfort, replacing the profound betrayal burning heavily within my chest. Every mile I traveled further away from Columbus solidified my unshakable resolve to legally enforce the exact consequences they rightfully deserved. I allowed the endless incoming emergency calls to continuously flood my mobile device without ever reaching out to answer the treacherous individuals who had just cursed my existence. The following morning, I completely bypassed my scheduled return to the military base, driving straight toward the legal assistance office situated downtown. Carrying a heavy manila folder containing every single original real estate document, I marched directly into the private workspace of my lawyer, Mr. Sterling. I dropped the thick stack of property deeds onto his polished wooden desk, while clearly explaining the absolute urgency behind my sudden unannounced visit. I want them completely cut off from my finances, effective immediately, I demanded, while tapping my hand aggressively on the wooden desk in the lawyer's office to emphasize my absolute seriousness. Hearing the disturbing details regarding their malicious conversation, Mr. Sterling immediately began initiating the strict formal procedures required to legally terminate their financial access. He proactively contacted the military banking institution on my behalf to permanently freeze every single secondary credit card they currently possessed, without offering any grace period. We also permanently canceled the automated monthly transfer system, ensuring those deceitful individuals would never receive another dollar from my dangerous combat deployments. Watching those joint accounts officially drop to zero provided an immense wave of satisfaction, confirming I had finally taken back control over my own hard-earned wealth. With the financial arteries successfully severed, my attention shifted entirely toward rapidly reclaiming the physical residential property they were currently occupying in Columbus. Mr. Sterling quickly reviewed the specific real estate tenant laws governing the state of Ohio to ensure our next aggressive maneuver remained entirely lawful. He meticulously drafted a formal 30-day eviction notice, mandating their complete physical removal from my residential property without any possibility of legal appeal. The comprehensive document detailed their status as mere guests on my property, explicitly revoking their permission to remain inside the house any longer. The eviction notice will be legally binding and delivered by this afternoon, Mr. Sterling affirmed firmly while signing his name onto the bottom corner of the legal document stack. He carefully sealed the sharp legal warning inside a heavy security envelope to be dispatched immediately using a highly secure Priority Express delivery service. That specific courier method required a direct physical signature upon receipt, guaranteeing the eviction paperwork would be placed directly into their hands before sunset. Leaving the legal center feeling incredibly vindicated, I walked toward a quiet coffee shop located just down the busy street to meet someone implicitly trustworthy. David sat patiently across from me inside a small corner booth, carefully listening to the entire infuriating story regarding my parents, actively plotting my demise. He offered his unwavering, solid support regarding my decisive disciplinary actions, confirming that severing those toxic financial ties was the only logical survival strategy. Having my closest confidant validate my extreme reaction provided a profound sense of mental clarity after experiencing such an immense familial betrayal the previous night. While we conversed quietly over our hot morning coffee, my mobile phone screen illuminated constantly with an endless stream of incoming voicemail notifications. Valerie was frantically flooding my digital inbox with lengthy audio recordings, attempting to fabricate pathetic excuses for the unforgivable statements I had overheard. Her frantic, desperate messages were undoubtedly filled with fake crying alongside pathetic attempts to shift the heavy blame onto excessive holiday alcohol consumption. Rather than subjecting myself to their manipulative, toxic apologies, I calmly pressed the delete button on every single notification without listening to a single second. Watching those frantic digital messages disappear permanently from my cellular device felt like lifting a massive, crushing weight directly off my exhausted physical shoulders. Eliminating their voices from my immediate environment allowed me to focus entirely on preparing myself for the inevitable physical confrontation I knew was rapidly approaching. 1 week later, I found myself stationed inside the secure military command center monitoring routine operational logistics when the primary desk phone unexpectedly started ringing loudly. The armed security personnel stationed at the main installation gate reported a highly agitated civilian group, causing a massive disruption while aggressively demanding a direct meeting with me. Recognizing the inevitable confrontation, I calmly locked my secure computer terminal before initiating the long walk toward the designated civilian visitor screening area, situated just beyond the fortified perimeter checkpoints. Approaching the cold metal visitor tables, I instantly recognized the haggard and panicked faces of my parents standing alongside Valerie in the freezing winter air. Those desperate individuals had frantically navigated that grueling 5-hour highway journey I had recently endured purely to salvage their completely terminated financial lifeline. Their previous arrogant confidence had entirely evaporated, leaving behind nothing except a pathetic display of extreme desperation radiating clearly from their exhausted physical postures. They looked completely disheveled, having likely driven entirely through the freezing night the moment they received the legally binding eviction notice delivered by the priority courier service. We did not mean any of it. It was just the alcohol talking. My mom sobbed hysterically while gripping the cold steel security barrier tightly to beg for my immediate forgiveness. Valerie quickly chimed in, attempting to fabricate a ridiculous narrative blaming their unforgivable Christmas Eve statements entirely on overwhelming holiday stress, combined with excessive imported wine consumption. My dad stood silently beside them, sporting a humiliated expression, while hoping their theatrical apologies would magically restore unlimited access to my hard-earned combat savings. They genuinely believed tossing out a few fake tears would easily manipulate the loyal military son back into blindly financing their luxurious suburban lifestyle, without any further questions asked. Refusing to waste another second entertaining their manipulative lies, I reached directly into my uniform cargo pocket to retrieve a folded stack of printed banking documents. I aggressively slammed the detailed financial statements, highlighting their luxurious steakhouse dinner, directly onto the frozen metal table, separating us with a resounding smack. Placing a duplicate copy of the official 30-day legal eviction notice right beside those damning restaurant receipts instantly silenced their coordinated chorus of fake weeping. The undeniable written proof of their calculated financial exploitation, sitting completely exposed under the harsh security floodlights, destroyed every single pathetic excuse they attempted to utilize during this confrontation. Staring directly into their absolutely horrified eyes, I felt zero lingering familial obligation toward the selfish individuals who had actively prayed for my violent battlefield demise. Allowing them to remain standing at the military checkpoint any longer felt like a massive insult to the uniform I proudly wore every single day. "Escort these civilians off the base immediately," I ordered firmly without a single ounce of hesitation, while turning my back entirely on the stunned group standing at the perimeter. Two heavily geared military police officers stepped forward to enforce my verbal command by physically guiding the trespassing individuals back toward their parked civilian vehicle. The strict military personnel left absolutely no room for negotiation, as they forcefully directed my former family members away from the highly secured installation entrance. Standing perfectly still near the fortified guardhouse, I watched their familiar car slowly reverse out of the visitor parking lot, before disappearing completely behind the heavy automated security gates. Pulling my mobile device from my tactical vest, I systematically navigated through my digital contact list to permanently block every single phone number associated with my greedy relatives. Watching their contact profiles vanish from my digital screen provided an overwhelming sense of profound emotional liberation, replacing the heavy burden I had carried for so many years. Erasing their digital presence from my daily existence finalized the termination of the toxic bloodline ties that had silently drained my resources for far too long. 2 months after the eviction mandate legally expired, the local authorities successfully enforced the complete removal of those ungrateful occupants from the Columbus residence. Stripped of the massive financial security my combat deployments previously guaranteed, they frantically packed their accumulated possessions into a cheap rented moving van. They ultimately relocated into a notoriously cramped apartment building situated deep within the neglected outskirts of a neighboring suburban town. Their severely downgraded living environment perfectly reflected the sudden collapse of their deceptive schemes, proving that exploiting a loyal son carries devastating consequences. The spacious bedrooms they once occupied were immediately replaced by thin apartment walls, amplifying the constant noise of heavy traffic outside their tiny windows. Valerie received an incredibly brutal reality check upon realizing her luxurious shopping sprees were officially terminated without any possibility of future reinstatement. Completely cut off from the unlimited military funds she had previously abused, she was desperately forced to submit employment applications across town. She eventually secured a menial part-time cashier position, working long, exhausting shifts at a heavily crowded local discount supermarket. Spending her entire day standing on her feet, scanning cheap groceries for minimum wage completely shattered her arrogant delusions of effortless wealth. She could no longer simply snap her fingers expecting my hazardous overseas deployments to magically finance her premium steakhouses or designer cosmetic treatments. Rather than holding on to the tainted residential property, I signed a comprehensive contract authorizing a reputable real estate agency to immediately list the empty house. The beautifully maintained structure attracted multiple competitive buyers, allowing the agent to finalize a highly profitable sale, significantly exceeding the initial purchase value. I strictly instructed the closing attorney to funnel every single recovered dollar directly into a specialized high-yield personal retirement investment portfolio. Watching that massive financial nest egg solidify my upcoming civilian transition permanently cured the deep emotional wounds inflicted by their heartless Christmas conversation. I chose to aggressively protect my own future instead of sacrificing my physical safety for individuals secretly praying for my permanent battlefield absence. The profound silence surrounding my daily military routine now feels incredibly peaceful compared to the endless barrage of manipulative demands they previously forced upon me. Removing their toxic influence from my immediate surroundings dramatically improved my mental focus, allowing me to execute my tactical duties without any lingering civilian distractions. I successfully reclaimed the heavy financial resources they attempted to steal, while simultaneously establishing impenetrable personal boundaries, protecting my future peace of mind. The painful journey Marcus endured provides an incredibly profound lesson regarding the dangerous limitations surrounding blind familial loyalty. Sacrificing your own stability does not automatically purchase genuine love or earn authentic respect from inherently greedy individuals. Unconditional generosity often transforms compassionate people into easily exploited financial tools for selfish relatives demanding continuous, unearned rewards. Establishing rigid boundaries to permanently sever ties with highly toxic family members never constitutes an act of cruelty. It represents an absolutely necessary defensive measure required to preserve your own dignity against those utilizing emotional manipulation for personal enrichment. A truly supportive family dynamic will always prioritize your physical safety and mental happiness far above any monetary wealth you might provide. Walking away from people secretly praying for your downfall remains the strongest victory anyone can achieve against relentless familial exploitation. Thank you immensely for listening completely through this deeply bitter, yet remarkably decisive real-life revenge story today. What are your honest thoughts regarding the aggressively firm disciplinary actions Marcus took against his deceitful family members? Please share your valuable personal perspectives down below inside the active comment section so we can discuss them. Do not forget to hit the like button alongside subscribing to the channel for more upcoming videos we respectfully prepared for you.